right, we now have Representatives Ayash, Brayback, and McFall here to testify in support of their House bills 4191, 4192, 4193, and 4194. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'll be very brief and then pass it along to my colleagues and our guests here today. We have a bill package that would codify into law the program that the Secretary of State and the Michigan Department of Corrections program that would give returning citizens their IDs or driver's license prior to leaving the prison, so that as they re-enter into society, they have the right documents to be able to get employment, jobs, housing, things of that nature. So they're not walking around with an inmate ID, but rather a state of Michigan driver's license or ID if they previously had one. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to Representative Brayback to discuss, and then McFall, and then we're going to bring in some of our guests to discuss the direct impact of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, committee. Rep. Ayash just talked about this, but this is a collaboration between the administration, the Secretary of State, and MDOC, DOC, to create the Returning Citizens Initiative. And I just want to take a brief moment to be able to emphasize how important this program is. As many of us know, our state IDs are necessary to find housing, employment, open bank accounts, and access public benefits, all of which are crucial for reintegrating formerly incarcerated individuals into our society. In the vulnerable time after release from prison, the effort to find appropriate documentation to prove who you are can be a daunting task. This is what we're trying to address. If formerly incarcerated people are not able to access housing or get a job because they are unable to obtain proper ID, it is unlikely that they will successfully reintegrate into our communities. Offering IDs has the potential to reduce recidivism and keep everyone safe because basic needs are being met. This partnership removes the obstacle for many and improves successful reentry, which ultimately reduces the taxpayer burden and supports our entire community. Now that you've heard about kind of the importance of the program, I'd like to turn it over to our colleague, Representative McFall, to continue talking about this very important initiative. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Brayback. Thank you, Madam Chair, for having us this morning. I think it goes without saying the economic impact of returning citizens can have. We are facing an employment shortage, as everyone knows. All you have to do is go to a restaurant or any place else, and everybody is short on staffing. What this will do is actually allow for setting people up for success that are returning. So the economic development and the economic impact of this, like Rep. Brayback said, most employers have direct deposit, so it'll allow them to open a bank account. So I think, just setting them up for success it will set us up for success, society-wide. So I think, many employers are looking for people, so we need to make sure that we are setting everyone up so that they do not return back to prison. Thank you.
Thank you. And here to speak in support of the bills, we have Kyle Kaminsky from the Michigan Department of Corrections and Aaron Shore from the Michigan Department of State. Oh, and Kyla Crane. I'm sorry.
You're welcome to stay with us. It's up to you.
We're just playing some musical chairs.
There you go. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, representatives. I'm Erin Shore. I'm the Legislative Policy Director with the Michigan Department of State, and this is our Deputy Legal Director, Keela Crane. At the risk of dating myself, I was sharing with Rep. Filler before committee started that I remember going to work for an individual legislator from Southfield back in 2004 when our oldest child was just a baby and saying, what's this issue about prisoner ID that we're working on? So these bills have been a long time coming, and I could not be more thrilled to be here today and report that we have a program in place with a high rate of success, and we're excited that these bills will ensure it continues for a long time to come.
And
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, Kyle Kaminsky, Legislative Liaison with the Michigan Department of Corrections. Echoing what the Department of State has shared, this was a multi-decade problem, but very pleased with the work of both agencies under the direction of Director Washington and obviously Secretary of State Benson to finally get this solved in 2020. Just briefly, and happy to take questions about the process, but just briefly in terms of the actual process, the Department of Corrections helps secure a birth certificate for everybody incarcerated in the state of Michigan. We start that during the intake process. Since 2020, we've secured a little over 35,000 individual birth certificates. As folks reach 6 months from their earliest release date, so their first potential date of parole, we work and take that birth certificate, meet with the individual, have them complete an application for a state ID or driver's license. That is done by our education staff at the facilities. They then submit that through an electronic file transfer site to our partners at the Department of State, who then do all of their great work, and then that ID is sent back to us, and it can go into that person's file so that on the day of release it can be handed to them. We have done, actually I'll let Department of State share how many we've done, but we've done quite a few. Very proud of what we've achieved, and we are consistently now hitting about 98% plus of people going home every month that have either a state ID or a driver's license when they leave prison. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the Department of State, maybe just to share a couple other key stats or other information.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kyle. And good morning to you all. Again, I'm Keela Crane, the Deputy Legal Director for the Secretary of State's office. Thank you, Chair Hope, and Vice Chair Fuller for letting us be here today. We are really excited about the program that we've been able to have with the Department of Corrections. Just as a little bit of backdrop, before the Secretary came into office, we were working with the Department of Corrections with our mobile branch unit, going around to 4 prisons every year and helping residents be able to get their IDs or driver's license before they returned home. That yielded about 400 driver's licenses or state IDs over that time. When we started to escalate this program under the direction of Director Washington and the Secretary, starting in September of 2020 through the present, as Kyle stated, we're now hitting about 98% of all of the returning citizens that are leaving. That means that between September 2020 and now, we've done over 12,000 transactions with the Secretary of State's office. And it has consistently escalated from September 20 through now. And so we are very proud of this program. It will be essential, as Representative Brayback said just a few minutes ago, it's essential for folks to be able to, upon release, have this document, either the state ID or their driver's license, so that they can reintegrate into society smoothly. It builds them with pride. We've been able to talk with community partners of the returning citizens that are excited about being able to rebuild their life and not having to utilize the prison ID. The legislature has already required our office to accept a prisoner ID if they should need to come to our office, either to convert their state ID into a driver's license, but just being able to have a state ID upon release unlocks so many doors, as well as giving them a sense of hope that they can continue their lives upon exiting. I'm happy to answer any questions that the legislature may have.
We do have a couple of questions. Representative Carter.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just listening, and you went back to 2004. I guess my question is, what took so long? I mean, we're in the 102nd session, and I keep hearing about what happened in the past with other legislatures. And if it's been a need, a real need, and it has been, because I've worked in criminal justice, what took so long?
Yeah, I mean, I think the department can weigh in on that a little bit. Sometimes it just comes down to resources. This is not an inexpensive endeavor, and it also takes quite a bit of staffing resources. And quite honestly, historically, the Department of Corrections was not provided with those resources. Going back 6-7 years ago when Director Washington took over, she more or less said, well, we may not be being provided with the resources, but we're going to do it nonetheless. And so we started that birth certificate program. Those birth certificates do cost us $34 each, so you can imagine if you do the math, we've spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million on birth certificates over the last few years without any additional appropriation to do that. We just have a leadership now that believes in the importance of that, so we're doing that. But that's part of the factor, I think, is sometimes the problem solving also takes some of the resources to make it happen. And in the past, while the legislature was open to the concept of vital documents. We didn't see the level of support that we see from our current sponsors of these bills and others to make sure that this is now that we've fixed it once, let's not have to fix it again in the future type situation.
And I'll just add this, Rep. Carter. I commend Director Washington and Secretary of State Benson for running this as a pilot, but we don't want this to be contingent on what the SOS or MDOC would want to do, right? This will put it into statute so that no matter who the SOS is or who's in the head of MDOC, this program will be in place so long as the legislature sees that the funding is necessary and the funding is there. And before we get to the question about what this program costs, because I know that'll come up, this program is already funded under the current budgets for SOS and MDOC. So we're not seeing a significant financial or fiscal impact in terms of what is required to run this program. But when you look at the societal impact of avoiding people going back into crime or doing things that they otherwise wouldn't do if they had an opportunity to get housing, banking, employment, this is a huge benefit to the society overall. So,
And I would say it's clear this is one piece that reflects the change in how we have approached corrections work over the years. If you look at shortly after that 2004 date, in 2007, 2008, the department was starting to work on their prisoner reentry initiative, but that was relatively new. We were just putting in place things like the driver responsibility fees at that point. We had 60,000 people in our prisons. And with the help of the legislature, we really have changed that. You've passed the clean slate laws. We have taken these things from initiatives to common practice with corrections now. And so there really is a focus on rehabilitation and getting folks back into our communities that just has taken a while.
Representative Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here and sharing your insight and expertise on this. I just have a question, and it may seem like kind of an odd question, but I'm looking at my fantastic portrait that Secretary of State took on my license. Is there a provision in there where people coming out of corrections, when they get that photograph taken, that they're not in a corrections uniform?
Yeah, so we take the photo, but we use the official Department of State backdrop, and the way the photos are taken, you can't tell that they're in prison when that photo's taken. So we are the ones that do the actual photo and send that to Department of State, but it's done exactly to their parameters, so no one would know the difference. And the question sometimes comes up, it is not the same photo that appears on our website, on the Otis website.
Perfect, thank you.
Representative Breen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, it's a two-part question. I have problems accessing the House Fiscal Agency analysis, but you said in the budget this is already funded. I'm wondering about the approximate costs. And I'm also wondering, and I'm not sure if you did cover this or not, if there are unpaid court costs, often people lose their license. Is there, how are you guys addressing the unpaid court costs that some recent parolees or probationers may have?
Okay. So for the first question, we are grateful for the funding that the Department of Corrections has, but it covers the majority of the costs that we have. There are other costs from our department that we absorb for the one FTE that works on this. We definitely need more FTEs to be able to work on this because as it stands right now, we're only working on the Department of Corrections, and if that person goes on break or leave or vacation, which we all encourage, of course, that you have to have you should have an automatic backup versus trying to have people piece the puzzle so that this runs smoothly. So there's that aspect of it. To your second question, Representative, this does not actually meet those needs. Those are additional needs that need to be met by returning citizens. A person will walk out with either a state ID or a driver's license if they are qualified. Everybody is qualified for the most part, for a state ID. There are certain qualifications that you need for a driver's license. If you're suspended or otherwise unable to get a driver's license, then the fallback is a state ID. And then once they have re-entered, then they need to go through the process of finding out what court costs or other aspects they need to pay so that they can clear the suspension or the revocation so they can get a full driver's license. So we're not there yet, but with additional resources, and we might be able to assist returning citizens in that regard, or with our other programs that we have, like our Road to Restoration clinics that we have around the state as well.
Thank you. I just want to be clear, I absolutely support this. I feel like the benefits to this far outweigh any of the costs. I just want to make sure that people reentering society aren't given a license only to be told, oh, you have several $1,000s in court fees you have to pay, we're going to take that away, and now they've lost their job, which requires a driver's license. So I just want to make sure that, just thinking a little bit ahead, that there is some type of amnesty or some type of a program that will make sure that they have some time to repay those court costs without losing the job that they just gained.
I think that we would welcome an opportunity to speak more about that. I know that the great program that the Department of Corrections has with Vocational Village, some of those folks do need a driver's license in order to take some of those jobs, and that is one of the barriers that we still need to break down about how do they get the funding, or how do they be able to work with people on the outside to clear some of those outstanding fines or fees or other things that are inhibiting them from getting a full driver's license. So I don't believe that is reflected in this particular package. It's more so to codify the program that we have. But we would definitely love an opportunity to speak to you more about that aspect.
Thank you.
We have 3 more representatives with questions, and then after that we have at least six people who would like to speak in support of this package, and I'm not good at math, so if we could make it brief questions, that would be appreciated. Representative Cernoglu.
Thank you, and thank you all for your work. Could you remind me what it looks like now when someone is released, like current programs? Is there somewhere for them to go, a job available? Like just real briefly, what does that look like?
Yeah, so Michigan has a very robust reentry system. We contract on a regional basis, so the state's split into 10 regions. There's an administrative agency that holds a state contract for each of those 10 regions. They either provide or broker services for the reentering population. About half of the expenditure is around what we call residential stability, which would be temporary housing, generally up to 90 days. About a third of people leaving prison will utilize that service. The other 2/3 will have either their own housing or family support that they'll go to. The other big focus area is around employment. So each of those regional administrative agencies works on job placement and job retention services. We also have an internal group within the MDOC that works quite a bit on job placement services. So folks leaving prison generally, depending on their risk, will have access to those level of services. There are folks who leave prison who don't because they're low risk, and the research essentially says that that's not who you should direct your resources to. But yes, folks who are leaving would go out, their parole agent serves as their case manager, and then they would access services from either that administrative agency or that administrative agency's subcontractors.
Representative Mueller.
Just really quick, you said that this practice is already in place. You said about 90%. So if we put it into law, is this just going to be another law that we have on the books? I agree with what you're trying to do, but is it kind of like just another law that's going to be on the books? Because what's the penalty if you guys don't get someone their ID card? And let's say also, if someone's been in prison for 10 years, I know they have to meet requirements to get their driver's license. Is that going to fall on them, their responsibility to pay for like a driver's retraining course? Because if they've been in prison 10, 15 years, you know, technology has changed and they might want to need to learn how to drive again as well. But if you're already doing this, is it really necessary, or is it something that you guys could just figure out on your own and you don't need the law?
Representative, if I can take the first crack at that, and then about the driver's test, I'll let the department speak to it. So this program was only developed because the Secretary of State and MDOC wanted to run it. They're not required to. So this would guarantee that the program would be in place regardless of who's the SOS in the future. You know, next term or the term after that, there could be a concern that the SOS may not want to do a program like this, but we've seen success in the program like this, and we want to make sure it continues, and it's not on the whims of whatever someone's political leanings may be or what someone's priorities are. This is just an appropriate step to sort of keep the program in place regardless of who's in charge, so that the program does not come or go depending on who is in charge.
To the question about like driver's licenses, so while we do have some standalone vocational programs to teach people how to do commercial truck driving, that's a separate relationship that we have with the Department of State, which is very successful. The MDOC does not train folks to get their normal driver's license. So those folks would be getting a state ID if they left, and then it would be up to them if they wanted to pursue whatever steps they needed to take post-release to convert that into a driver's license.
Okay. And lastly, is there any penalties or fines to the department if they fail to get someone their ID on time when they get out of prison, since it's going to be a law? Or is it just, oh, we just didn't do it?
There are not penalties and fines, and we would, as much as we're supportive of the language or the legislation we wouldn't be supportive of penalties and fines because we're doing 98% right now, and quite honestly, the 2% that remain oftentimes are cases like people don't know what state they were born in, so we can't obtain a birth certificate. Their vital documents, their name doesn't match across vital documents, so we can't obtain it. So really, we're hitting just about every case that we can assist with, and the ones that are left are kind of these outliers that we work on, but are quite honestly oftentimes beyond the control of either agency.
Representative Devendorf.
Thank you, Chair. I will date myself and say I remember when Aaron was the lead staffer on Judiciary. So I appreciate you being in these overlapping roles on this issue. I inherited all those files from you at one point. I wanted to just confirm that this requirement, which I feel is absolutely necessary, we know how much this and other things get in the way of access and opportunity. How are we within these bills ensuring that the requirement for an ID does not delay the scheduled release?
So the legislation itself doesn't speak to that, but we would never delay release based on ID availability. So in those scenarios where somebody is going to release and their ID has not reached us, Department of State would still mail that ID to our central office here in Lansing. We would immediately mail it to the parole agent who supervises that person. The parole agent would meet with the person and hand it off to them and then make a record of it. We don't mail directly to the parolee because we want a record of the handoff of the document, but it would never impact. There's very limited circumstances under which a parole would be suspended or delayed, and lack of ID would never be one. It doesn't really meet the criteria for that.
Very quickly, Representative Carter.
Real quick, and I'm really going to date myself. Am I the only one that remembers what a Kilroy was for prisoners?
You'll have to educate me on this because this does predate me.
It's like when folks would come down on a writ and they'd have fines and fees, but because they were locked up, they weren't able to pay, so they wiped it clean. I guess I am the only one, huh? Okay.
Thank you very much. We do have quite a number of folks who would like to speak in support of this bill package. We have Monica Janer with ARRO and Nation Outside who would like to testify in support.
I'm sorry. Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. I'm Asia Wilson, and I'm here on behalf of Monica Janer. She couldn't make it. My name is Monica Janer. I'm a manager of ARRO, a reentry and day reporting program in Ingham County. The day reporting program is a reentry program that provides wraparound services to probationers that come to our program as an alternative to going to prison and jail. I can't tell you how much time our staff spends trying to get IDs for parolees and probationers. Trying to obtain the necessary documents to get an ID or license can be a challenge at the very least. Implementing this legislation to allow the use of the oldest IDs is so important. We can't have successful criminal justice clients if they don't have an ID, social security card, and license. Clients must be able to get out and find work. They can't do that without an ID. We have to make this process easier. If we could get the MDOC to comply with the law already on the books by providing the ID prior to leaving prison or jail, or ensuring that they have the necessary documents to get an ID, the clients will have the opportunity to get out and immediately begin their transition into the community. I was very disappointed that this legislation doesn't allow the Otis to be an approved photo document. I spent months working with the Secretary of State to approve Otis as an approved photo. The Otis tracking photo and information is exactly the same as the prison ID that they provide prisoners. The Otis system is very secure, and the only people with access to it is the MDOC. It makes common sense that Otis be allowed when the Otis is where the MDOC creates the ID from. I have been allowed to submit the Otis and a notary document to the Secretary of State for my clients, but no one else is allowed to do this.
Excuse me, Asia, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we do have this testimony in written form.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions? And it's also on the committee website.
Okay.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I'm going to call up two at a time now, just for the sake of moving things along. We have Cosine Welch with the Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration, and Ken Nixon from Safe and Just Michigan.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I also want to thank the bill sponsors. My name is Kenneth Nixon. I am the Director of Outreach and Community Engagement with Safe and Just Michigan. I am also an exoneree. I spent almost 16 years incarcerated for a crime I didn't commit. And upon coming home in February of 2021, this was an issue that directly impacted me. Because I was an Innocence Project client, organizations from all over the country sent me checks to help get back on my feet. Problem was, I didn't have an ID. Without an ID, I couldn't get a bank account. Without an ID, I couldn't cash a check. I also didn't have a birth certificate or a Social Security card. I couldn't get one without the other. So approximately 6 months later, I eventually got all my documents. It took me 5 months to get a birth certificate. This was a problem that should not have been a problem. I spent almost 6 months trying to reprove to the government that I was the person they had in custody for almost 16 years. I could not help myself upon my release because I didn't have documents to show the government that I was the person that they had in custody for a decade and a half. It makes no sense. These bills would allow access to regular citizenship. When you walk out of prison and you don't have documents, you are nobody. You do not exist in the state of Michigan. I want to thank the MDOC for the processes that they've taken so far to make sure that this doesn't continue to be a problem. Fact is, it's still a problem. 98% is a great number, but that means 2% is still slipping through the cracks. And unfortunately, without legislation, there's a potential that we can backslide. For the panel, for the speakers that are here today, that with the law enforcement background, we all know that you can also be detained without proper identification. That means you can be repeatedly victimized by the system without proper documentation, to no fault of your own. I asked the Attorney General this question one day, and I'll ask every one of you here today. You took my ID when you arrested me. Why didn't you give it back to me when you let me go?
Thank you, Lady Chair. Thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to speak. For the sake of speed and efficiency, I've written this down so I can speed read it for you. My name is Cosine Welch, and Program Coordinator for MySemi, the Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration. And I'm here to speak in support of the Returning Citizens Initiative package of bills being placed before the committee today. The MySemi Collaborative represents over 110 member organizations from across the state of Michigan, including many re-entry service providers and formerly incarcerated people alike. And across the board, we've heard and experienced the massive barriers that such a minuscule document as an identification card can create for our neighbors and family members returning home. As a former executive director of a nonprofit in Washtenaw County called A Brighter Way, I can recall a particular instance when one of our members who had just come home weeks earlier was trying to find employment and housing and was fortunate enough to have gotten a paid speaking engagement with a local voting rights organization. However, he was unable to cash the check. Think about it. he had found a way around his temporary ID trouble for the work he had done. He could not get recompensation. In fact, it took a bank president to finally allow authorization. Now, incarcerated at the age of 17 myself, I also faced difficulty in obtaining my vital documents. I also went to places of employment and banking institutions with a prison ID that was politely declined in the best of situations. And just as importantly, I also had to experience and watch as loved ones and family members stood as shocked, confused, and as upset as I was at a barrier that shouldn't be. I also had to explain to them that yes, getting your vital documents should be easier, and yes, a person returning home from incarceration should be provided these things upon return, but they aren't. I only hope that after this series of bills, we'll finally be able to say that they should and they are. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Questions for either of these gentlemen? Thank you. Oh, yes, please.
One last thing to the last panel of speakers that was up here, and we were talking about the driver's license. I want to make sure that I emphasize a point. On the back of each traffic ticket, there's a fine and there's also time served. Everybody that's sent to prison does more than 90 days. Most traffic tickets have a 90-day time limit. The problem is the traffic courts don't communicate with the state prison system. When you're released from prison, you've already served the time for that traffic ticket. They just don't know it.
That's a good note. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And now we have testimony on Zoom. We have Will Lewis, who is a youth specialist at the Oakland County Children's Village, who's testifying in support of these bills.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak here today, Madam Clerk and everyone. As you said, my name is William Lewis, and I am a returning citizen. I've been home approximately about 10 and a half months after serving 21 years. And everyone has spoken to the specifics about the importance of vital documents, but just from a personal aspect, after having done that amount of time coming home, thanks to the MDOC, I did have my birth certificate, I did have a state ID, but I didn't have my social security card. And due some part to my own ignorance with the new computer systems and social media, it took me weeks and weeks and weeks to set up the appointment, to get my social security card so that I could get a driver's license and that I could secure things like employment, residence, etc. And just from a personal aspect, the importance of all of that is that for me, after spending so much of my adult life in prison, it was absolutely critical that my first steps be good ones, that, you know, I could have the fundamental things I needed to build a productive and healthy life for myself, such as a job, such as a place to live. And those documents were critical to that. And even though it was only a delay of maybe, 4 to 6 weeks to get everything I needed, that's 4 to 6 weeks that I was kind of in limbo, that I was anxious and fearful of falling back, into criminality, falling back into, frustrations and the traps that are out there. And of course, it's my own responsibility not to do that, but being able to have those documents and knowing that you can take the steps you need to secure the essentials you need to build a solid foundation are absolutely critical to just moving forward. And again, I can't emphasize how important this stuff is, and that it not just be a choice that someone at MDOC is making or someone in the administration of the MDOC is making, but that it be an obligation and a requirement so that everyone coming home can be certain that they can make the steps they need to secure a solid foundation upon which to build a productive and healthy lifestyle. So again, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to speak here, and thank you for all those who sponsored this bill.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Lewis? Thank you, sir. We now have Jose Burgos with the State Appellate Defender Office testifying in support of the bills.
Yes. Thank you very much to this committee. Once again, my name is Jose Burgos, and I am a reentry specialist at the State Appellate Defender's Office. These bills are very, very important. I'm actually surprised that here in 2023, we're still talking about those coming home having proper identification when it's such a critical component of the reentry process. When I first started working for SATO back in 2019, we were running against that. We were running against, we were running into a lot of problems with those that were coming home who didn't have proper identification. So, they had to get over those hurdles. But I would say that, since then, the MDOC that has done a great job, and they have the vast majority of our clients now are coming home with state IDs. But this issue is not only do I support this from a professional standpoint, but I also am a formerly incarcerated juvenile lifer who served 27 years. And when I came home, I didn't have a birth certificate. So for an entire year, I struggled with, getting jobs, being able to open up a bank account, all sorts of stuff, you know what I'm saying? And I actually even contemplated the thought and the idea that maybe I'm going to be out here without identification. And that was a very, very, very scary thought, you know what I'm saying? Because like Mr. Nixon said, when I was at the Secretary of State and I showed him the ID that the MDOC gave me, which is a parolee ID, I had my Social Security card. I had a lot of stuff that proved who I was. And I told the person at the Secretary of State that if I violate parole right this very second, the very same state that the Secretary of State is an agency of, the law enforcement is going to know exactly who I am in that Secretary of State if I violate that parole. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's very important that men and women coming home have these documents, so they can get the services that they need, so they can get jobs, so they can open up bank accounts and get back, get back in the mainstream of society and do the things that they want to do. So at the State Appellate Defender's Office, we support this legislation. We believe it's very important. And thank you for the opportunity for me to testify.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Burgos? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Also on Zoom, we have Conrad Cowell with the Center for Employment Opportunities testifying in support of the bills.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and the members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to have me here today. My name is Conrad Cowell. I am the life skill instructor and job coach for the Center for Employment Opportunity. We are a national organization, and one of our goals and our main goal is providing exclusive employment opportunities for those who are just as involved. So we deal with individuals who unfortunately run into having to have that I-9 compliancy of being able to have identification to get employment. We employ over 2,500 returning citizens a year in this organization. So we specialize in this field. And unfortunately, we deal with a lot of individuals who don't have proper identification. I do appreciate what the MDOC has done when providing these documents. I have spent 30 years in the Michigan Department of Correction myself, and I'm a returning citizen. And I had to have my own personal experience with trying to get my identification. I was fortunate to have a birth certificate and a Social Security card upon getting out. However, my ID, trying to get a bank account, I was fortunate to have someone provide me with funds upon my release to put into a bank account. Couldn't get that bank account because I didn't have ID. So it took a minute to get that identification so I can be able to have a bank account set up to kind of establish my future. That was something that was vital for me after doing so much time. So coming home, I deal with so many individuals in this organization, including my own, Resurrection Back to Life, that has to deal with trying to provide documents for individuals so they can't just have work. So it does become a challenge. And we see this challenge every day. So I'm thankful for what is being done today. I was able to go to Jackson Prison just recently. They have what's called the Vocational Village there. Great program, love it. And I was pleased to see that they do provide driver's license and that kind of identification for individuals coming home, which is very important. Transportation back and forth to job opportunities is something that's essential. So having ID is so important. And it's sad we're at this state where we have to have a meeting about something so relatively needed just to have a success, and especially being someone who's a returning citizen. There's just so many barriers you already have to face, and ID shouldn't be one of them. So I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for giving us this voice to be able to present to you today, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colwell. Sorry I mispronounced your name. Questions for Mr. Colwell? I want to say a special thank you to all the formerly incarcerated folks who made the time to come in and share their stories. That perspective is really important on an issue like this, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We do. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Ayash, do you have something you'd like to say?
I just wanted to thank all the folks that came in today, and then also the bill sponsors, Representative Brayback, McFall, and Edwards, who was not able to be here today. But I also want to give a special shout out to Trent Wolf from my office, who has shepherded this issue for the last term and a half. So I just wanted to lift that up. I know staff oftentimes don't get credit for a lot of the work, so I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledged his hard work on this issue for the last 3 years.
Thank you. We have some cards now to read in. Thomas Adams from A Chance for Life does not wish to speak, supports the bills. Peter Rourke, from the Michigan League for Public Policy, supports the bills, does not wish to speak. Paul Stankiewicz from the Michigan Catholic Conference supports the bills, does not wish to speak. Carrie Rosengana from the Capital Area Michigan Works supports the bills, does not wish to speak. Gabrielle Dresner of ACL of Michigan is support of the bills, does not wish to speak. And that concludes cards. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.